friends. Hello there. Good morning. First and foremost, as you can see on the screen, this is a video about Dr. Fauci and AIDS. We're not talking about the C word. Therefore, there should be no reason for Facebook or any other platform to censor this information. I've been learning a lot about AIDS recently by reading this book. Fauci's been leading the charge on AIDS, just like he's been leading the charge on COVID. And Fauci has led the charge on AIDS since about 1984 when he took over as head of the NIAID. Interestingly, just the other day, you can see there he is, America's Dr. Anthony Fauci, just put out a new article in Nature where he's telling us how we can learn the lessons from AIDS and apply them to COVID-19. Now, I want to point out a couple things here. As you can see, I'm going to go all. It's not very long, so bear with me. But at the bottom here, you can see quite clearly the author declares no competing interests, right? Fauci says he's got no competing interests. And in this article, he is calling for, well, right here. I suspect that drugs based on monoclonal antibodies will soon play an important part in treating and preventing HIV, as they do for SARS-CoV-2. So Fauci, using his powerful platform there as the head of the NIAID, an unelected bureaucrat in D.C., who has experienced just overwhelming power over most people's lives in the last couple of years, pushing for lockdowns, mandatory injections, ignoring a lot of treatments that other doctors were calling for, funding studies into the jabs, but not other things that are more affordable, less invasive, less permanent than a jab. But anyway, he is saying that monoclonal antibodies will soon play an important part in treating and preventing HIV, claiming no conflicts of interest, right? No competing interests, which is kind of funny because if we look at Fauci's patents over here at patents.hustia.com, we can see that Fauci has a patent, a method for providing for the treatment of HIV infection. These methods can include administering to a subject with an HIV infection a therapeutically effective amount of an agent, thereby creating an HIV infection. What's he planning on using with this patent? Monoclonal antibodies. Patent filed on August 3rd, 2016. He's got another patent here, same thing, treating HIV with monoclonal antibodies, August 3rd, 2016. Another patent here, you get the gist, monoclonal antibodies, filed September 21st, 2015. Oh, he's got another patent here where he's calling for the use of monoclonal antibodies as a treatment for HIV, September 21st, 2015. And he's got a bunch more patents here. This one, another one dealing with AIDS, filed in 2000, the discovery of novel specific epitopes and antibodies associated with long-term survival of HIV infections. So I would argue, given all these patents that he personally is signed on to, many of which deal with using monoclonal antibodies as a treatment for HIV, that Fauci indeed has competing interests because he literally has skin in the game and stands to profit millions, if not billions of dollars if these monoclonal antibody treatments are applied to HIV. But no competing interests. Of course, it's important to note that Fauci's agency, the NIAID, also holds a lot of patents for assorted diseases as well. Well, let's see what America's shyster, Tony Fauci, has got to say about AIDS, HIV. Interestingly, we go right here. This year's World AIDS Day is on December 1st. And he says quite clearly there, he states very matter-of-factly, that HIV was shown to be the cause of AIDS in 1983-84. This is all pretty new information to me, but I've been reading this book. And all I have to say is, wow, I was very uninformed about AIDS and HIV. And to a large extent, I still am. But At least my intentions are pure as I try to educate myself more about this. We can see the profit motive is clearly playing a part in Fauci's coverage of HIV and AIDS. And his statements are kind of easy to disprove. This notion that HIV was shown to be the cause of AIDS in 83, 84 is very easy to debunk. You can see this article is on nature.com. Or we can go to an earlier nature.com article from 2018, just a couple years ago, where they're talking about the discovery of HIV. And we can see quite clearly here, in 1983, Luc Montagnier in France, found HIV, discovered HIV. And in 2008, he and his partner, Francois, were awarded the Nobel Prize for the isolation and characterization of HIV. Interestingly, in 1984, and it's important to note here, Luc Montagnier never said HIV causes AIDS. He said it might be associated. In 1984, Robert Gallo, who we're going to find out stole Montagnier's research, isolated HIV from a larger group of patients and suggested causative involvement. So he didn't prove in 1983 and 1984, AIDS and HIV were not proven. HIV was not proven to cause AIDS. There was a suggestion of causative involvement. And you can see right here, they isolated HIV-1 in approximately 47% of patients with pre-AIDS or AIDS, but in none of 115 heterosexual individuals with no known risk of AIDS. Okay, so they found HIV in 47% of patients with AIDS, which prompts the question, how did the other 53% of the patients have AIDS if they couldn't find HIV in those people? A third team, scientists at University of California, San Francisco, they detected HIV in 22 of 45 AIDS patients. So similar situation, slightly less than half of the AIDS patients, they discovered the HIV virus in those patients. In less than 2 years, at least 3 groups had isolated and characterized HIV-1, showing an association of HIV with AIDS and suggesting a causal link, suggesting the possibility that perhaps HIV was the cause of AIDS, despite the fact that they didn't find HIV in slightly more than half of the AIDS patients they were looking for, or they were studying, excuse me. So Fauci, right out the gate there, he's lying because it was not shown to be the cause of AIDS back then. And, if you read this book, I can't recommend this book enough. The Real Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the Global War on Democracy and Public Health. You can see there's a lot more to the story surrounding AIDS than we have been told. There has been a scientific debate about what really causes AIDS for decades, going on 40 years now. And you're never going to hear about it on the mainstream media. Anyway, continuing. Interestingly, I think it's important to note that Fauci does make a couple good points here, I have to say. He says the fight against HIV reveals how important it is to make use of existing treatments and strategies for prevention. Absolutely right. Which prompts the obvious question, why the heck did Fauci do everything in his power to block the use of existing treatments? And he literally hardly spoke at all about legitimate strategies for prevention, right? They talked about staying in your home, avoiding other people, wearing a mask. None of these things boost your immune system or makes you healthier, right? With COVID, we could have been talking about vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, making efforts, proper hydration will help you fight a virus. But we never heard Fauci talk about that. There are so many other therapeutics and preventative measures that so many brave doctors all over the world have rung the alarm on, yet Fauci seemed to do everything in his power to prevent people from getting those. He continues, there are many similarities that sadden me. How hard some patient groups need to fight for recognition. Yeah, like all the patients who didn't follow his recommendations, like the folks who've decided that they don't want experimental jabs. How misinformation and denialism can promote illness and death. No doubt, Fauci is guilty as that. More guilty of that than anyone. How slowly interventions reach vulnerable populations, especially when you suppress and criminalize and demonize those interventions. And how easy it can be to overlook patient inputs when setting research priorities. Yeah, kind of like how you focused entirely on the most profitable and invasive interventions, the most permanent interventions. And now stuff like the Merck anti-COVID pill, the Pfizer Mectin, the remdesivir. It seems like, forgive me for being a conspiracy theorist, but it seems like the trend is Fauci will do everything he can to stop effective, affordable, safe, time-tested treatments while propping up and promoting the latest, greatest, most profitable, but not necessarily most effective or well-tested or safe interventions. Interestingly, he says regarding AIDS, in the early frustrating days of the pandemic, physicians had little to offer our patients. Well, Fauci, I don't think you've ever seen a patient. But if I can trust this book, which I think I can trust a lot more than you, in the early days of AIDS, just as we saw in the early days of COVID, physicians were trying to help their patients, trying to repurpose existing, affordable, safe, time-tested treatments to save lives, to keep people out of the hospital, to slow the spread legitimately. And you, Dr. Fauci, and your minions did everything in your power to stop them, to suppress these treatments, to demonize and, discredit and, have medical boards attack and de-license these physicians who were doing everything in their power to legitimately slow the spread, save lives, avoid overwhelming healthcare facilities, etc. Scrolling on down again. He's saying, I suspect that drugs based on monoclonal antibodies will soon play an important role. And no surprise there, because Fauci literally owns the patents on a bunch of those monoclonal antibody HIV treatments. What else we got in here? And he's also, just so you know, he's pushing for an HIV vaccine. Safe and effective HIV vaccine has been elusive so far, but even a moderately effective vaccine could, together with the rest of the toolkit, bring an end to AIDS as a major health concern. I haven't been concerned about AIDS, and I'm pretty sure most people haven't for literal decades. All the hoopla surrounding AIDS kind of burned out 25 years ago. So, but here we see Fauci taking his clout, taking his influence from COVID, and using it to push more injections on the population. He makes another point in here. It's a short little letter, Nature publishing it, because they'll publish anything Fauci promotes. He says it says in another place there about pre-exposure prophylaxis, giving people antiretrovirals before they are exposed to HIV can be more than 95% effective in preventing them from acquiring it. Now, again, there is legitimate scientific debate that I knew nothing about until a couple of days ago about whether HIV is the real cause of AIDS. There are a lot of other factors. There could be other viruses in play. There could be environmental factors in play. So many things in play. Yet Fauci, if you read the book, just read the book and study some history, you can see that the whole notion that HIV, well, here we've already shown that back in the early 80s, at best, they were suggesting a causal link. Yet that became the mainstream narrative. HIV causes AIDS, despite the fact that in these early studies, 47% of the patients, they were able to isolate HIV. And this guy, Robert Gallo, this is from New York Times, 1992. After 3 years of investigation, well, Robert Gallo was, he's the guy that stole Luc Montagnier's HIV virus and claimed it as his own. And a federal inquiry found a serious misconduct. Most notably, you probably already read all that bit. Dun, dun, dun. Let's see. Where is the good quote here? Bummer. Wish I could pause this. So I can find it. Well, anyway, maybe it's in this article. Sorry. Here we go. So this is a National News report from 2009. I'm going to read you this one in its entirety and then wrap it up. Scientists allege fraud in the 1984 HIV/AIDS papers. Again, I'm trying to make it clear. This is a topic I'm just starting to get my feet wet in. This book woke me up to it a lot. It's important to note here, too, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he doesn't go out in this book, he's not going out and saying, this is the facts. He's saying there is a scientific debate on this that most people are not aware of, me being one of them until recently. I'm going to close it out with this article from David Gutierrez at National News, 2009. Scientists allege fraud in the 1984 HIV/AIDS papers. 37 legal, medical, and research professionals have sent a letter to the journal Science asking it to officially retract the original 4 letters, making the case for HIV as the cause of AIDS. According to the letter's authors, widespread evidence has now emerged that the studies were not only poorly carried out, but that their results were falsified. In 1984, Robert Gallo published 4 articles in Science claiming that he had isolated the HIV virus, and concluding that it was the probable cause of AIDS. Investigative journalist Janine Roberts has discovered, however, that Gallo made last-minute alterations to the paper and results. I was shocked when I read the original draft of the key scientific paper, now widely cited as proving HIV causes AIDS, said Roberts, author of Fear of the Invisible. Gallo's handwritten last-minute changes had reversed what the scientists in his lab had originally concluded. This demonstrates a stunning disregard for the scientific process and a very disturbing breach of the public trust. But it shouldn't really be a surprise considering that Gallo literally stole the virus from French researchers and claimed it to be his own, which held up research in AIDS and cost human lives. But that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the AIDS question. Let's continue. Along with a copy of the handwritten changes, the letter from the 37 experts includes a letter from Gallo himself admitting to another researcher that the HIV could not be isolated from human samples alone, and a letter from an electron microscopy expert saying that there was no HIV virus contained in Gallo's 1984 samples. So Gallo's research has come under fire before with U.S. government investigations in the 90s, which we just showed there, the New York Times article, concluding that the lead paper was fraught with false and erroneous statements and that the careless and unacceptable keeping of research records reflects irresponsible laboratory management that has permanently impaired the ability to retrace the important steps taken. That means his research was not verifiable, could not be replicated because important steps were omitted. With new findings that undermine the scientific integrity and veracity of Gallo's 4 papers, the entire basis of the theory that HIV causes AIDS may now be questioned, said David Crow, president of the international organization Rethinking AIDS. So there you go. Just some food for thought today. Can't stress it enough. This book has taught me a lot, and I hope y'all will get yourself a copy. Makes a great stocking stuffer, bestseller. Very informative. Not just about Fauci, not just about AIDS, but about what we're going through in the world today and how we got here. Y'all take care. One love. And, of course, peace.